welcome, welcome, welcome. On behalf of World of Wellesley, thank you for being here for our 26th annual Martin Luther King Day program. Before I start, I'd like to point out that the restrooms are through that back door to the left. Each year we gather to honor Martin Luther King Jr., not only by remembering his words, but by returning to the harder questions he posed again and again. What does justice require of us now, in moments of uncertainty, fatigue, and moral testing? Dr. King understood that courage is rarely dramatic. More often, it is patient. It is the willingness to keep moving forward without guarantees, to hold fast to conviction when progress is slow, and to choose integrity over ease. His vision of change was shaped not by speed, but by endurance, the long discipline of hope practiced day after day. That same discipline lives in a very different landscape, but it's no less recognizable. Our keynote speaker, J. Robert Harris, has spent more than 6 decades navigating some of the most remote and unforgiving wilderness locations on Earth, often alone, unsupported, and far from certainty. His life's work is grounded in patience, self-reliance, and the steady courage required to continue when the path is unclear and retreat is not an option. What connects these worlds? Civil rights movement to the wilderness. It's not scale or setting, but moral clarity. The understanding that progress, whether through a forest or through history, is shaped by attention, restraint, and the resolve to take the next step even when the horizon is obscured. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank the many community and town organizations whose presence and support make today possible. We're so grateful to the Wellesley Select Board, Wellesley Public Schools, Wellesley School Committee, Wellesley Police Department, the UU Church, St. Andrews, League of Women Voters, and thank you to Wellesley Media and Paul Falcone, who's back there recording this event. And you can all view it on public TV and on their YouTube channel. So your partnership reflects the spirit, shared, and responsibility and civic engagement that Dr. King called us towards, and we are deeply appreciative of your commitment to this community. I'd also like to briefly direct your attention to a few upcoming World of Wellesley programs. So we have a printed sheet on each of your tables for you to look through. And so these are programs that extend the work that we do today beyond today. They're listed on your tables. Our largest fundraiser of the year, the Boston Marathon. We're very, very proud to have Neil Houston running on behalf of World of Wellesley. Neil is here today. If you want to wave, Neil, there he is. So Neil grew up in Wellesley, attended our public schools, and returned here with his family after completing his medical training. His decision to run for World of Wellesley reflects a deep commitment to giving back and helping ensure the future generations that grow up in a community that is open, welcoming, and inclusive. We hope that you all consider supporting Neil as he runs for World of Wellesley, so take a moment to scan the QR code that's on page 2 of your program. If you flip the page, it's right there. Take a moment to scan that. It'll take you to our website. Please consider donating to Neil's run and supporting World of Wellesley. Secondly, please join us for our 2026 community book read featuring Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen. It's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Jose Antonio Vargas. This program will take place on Thursday, March 26th at the Wakeland Room and the library, and details are on our website. It's also on the program sheet on your table. And another program in partnership with the Wellesley Hills Congregational Church, we're inviting you to a reading of Frederick Douglass. It's called Reading Frederick Douglass Together, a community reading. And it's his powerful speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. So this event will take place on the 1st of February, 2026 at 2 p.m. at the church. And that program was funded very gratefully by Mass Humanities, Mass Cultural Council that made that possible. So we're very thankful to them. And at this point, I am very happy to invite my colleague and fellow board member, Bonnie Northern, to take the stage. Bonnie will introduce our keynote speaker and guide us into the heart of today's conversation. So with that, thank you very much for being here, and we hope you enjoy it, as I'm sure you will.
Thank you all for coming out like this. We actually arranged this snow for JR. We did. We wanted, this guy, he loves to be outdoors. He loves to be challenged. lives in New York City, but he's at home all over the world. So we brought in the snow for him. And in fact, I even wore my winter hiking boots for him, also because I couldn't find my other boots. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that his book, it's called Way Out There, Adventures of a Wilderness Trekker. It was named one of Backpacker Magazine's 50 best hiking and trekking walking books of all time. And JR is the subject of a documentary called Born Curious, which traces his journey from growing up in the New York City public housing project to becoming an explorer and an advocate for broader access to the outdoors. Copies of his books, of course, will be available today. Beyond exploration, JR is the founder and president of JRH Marketing Services, established in 1975 and recognized as the oldest African-American-owned marketing firm in the United States. He has spoken widely at schools, universities, and organizations across the country, sharing stories that connect lived experience with responsibility, imagination, and belonging. His work reminds us that Dr. King's legacy is not only something we remember, but something that we practice through resilience, courage, and the belief that dignity belongs everywhere. Please join me in welcoming J.R. Harris.
Just very cool. Let me just savor the moment here for a minute. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for the snow. You make me really feel at home here. This is really very cool. To begin, I'd like to thank the World of Wellesley for the opportunity to be here and to celebrate a great American. As you will see, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a profound influence on me, and I very much appreciate being able to say a few words about him and about his impact. I also want to apologize. I have a bit of a sore throat this morning. I'll deal with it the best way I can. I hope it's not too much of a distraction. This is a story of a kid from a working class family growing up on the streets of New York City. It's also a story of dreams, about having one, and about what it takes to make it come true. But mostly, it's a story about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the incredible power a dream can have to influence a person's life. The kid in the story is me. Like Dr. King, I also had a dream. And incredibly, my dream was realized partly because of hearing Dr. King talk about his dream. On a warm Wednesday morning, on August 28, 1963, I boarded a Greyhound bus in New York City, and like 250,000 other people that day, I went to Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and heard Dr. King give his iconic I Have a Dream speech. I was a 19-year-old college student at the time, and my dream was to be an explorer. I wanted to travel the globe in search of adventure, excitement, and knowledge. I wanted to go where other people hadn't gone. I wanted to see what other people hadn't seen. I was born curious. Back then, for a kid like me, that dream was not very realistic. They told me black people don't explore. They said you've got to have money. They said you've got to be white. Most of them were caring people, but their advice was not supportive. They said, be realistic. Don't set your sights too high. I was working nights, driving a taxi, and struggling to get my degree. My parents, who never finished high school, did everything they could to encourage me, but as time went on, my dream seemed more and more unattainable. But then I heard Dr. King speak, and I was mesmerized. More importantly, his words gave me the dedication to become an explorer, the inspiration to be a good one, and the motivation to pass his legacy on to others from diverse backgrounds. To put all this in perspective, I'm going to show you a brief film about my background and career, and when it's over, I will share with you a few lessons that I've learned and how Dr. King's legacy can have a similarly beneficial impact on anyone who has a dream. Here's the video.
The plan for today is not too ambitious. I'll pick up the Weasel River and make a camp opposite Thor Peak. To my delight, I find an actual trail with footprints on it. I don't know whose footprints they were. Back in camp, I kick back with 3 heaping plates of Sierra chicken with veggies and chocolate hot cocoa for dessert. Good living. I am warm and I am farting in my sleeping bag. It says it right here. I haven't seen these in years. This is Glacier. Glacier 1988. See those boots? They were killing me. They were killing me, man. I always wanted to be an explorer. And everybody would tell me, oh, you can't be an explorer, you don't have any money, you gotta be rich, you gotta be white, you gotta be this, you gotta be that. And my parents would say, no, man, you could be anything you wanna be. They said, it's not gonna be easy. Nobody's gonna give you anything. But if you want it badly enough, whatever it is, you can do it. We'll turn this one on.
Yeah.
All right, so you gotta turn this one back on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, turn it off. Okay, cool.
My name's James Robert Harris. Nobody ever called me James. Nobody ever called me Robert.
I grew up not too far from here in Queens, and I had a great childhood. There were hundreds of kids in the projects growing up.
We spent every day outside, but it wasn't outside in the great outdoors, as they call it.
I always wanted to be, a mountain man.
My first opportunity to do it happened when my parents decided that I should be in the Boy Scouts. Now, if you grew up in the city back in those days, being a Boy Scout was not necessarily what you wanted to do. Guys would hassle you, oh, did you help a little old lady cross the street? A Boy Scout was a guy who always did his homework and always made his bed, which I did. But, to be in a Boy Scout, I didn't want to do it. And when my parents said, we're going to send you to camp, in the mountains, I was like, oh no, man, I'm being exiled. You know, it's like being sent to Siberia, that they used to say. Don't send me there, please. And all my friends are going, you're going where? You're going what? No, no. But that was it. I had no choice. So they put me on a bus. And when I got off the bus, you know, I looked around and I was like, what is going on here? It was like another planet. To me, wildlife was cockroaches, rats, and pigeons. For the first time, I could see the sky from one side to the other. That summer, I learned so much. I learned how to use a compass and how to read a map and how to follow animal tracks, how to make a fire in pouring down rain. When I came back, and my folks asked, how was it? I was begging them already, send me next year. And they were going, wait a minute. You were going kicking and screaming. We had to force you to get on the bus. And now, all of a sudden, you want to go back. I wanted to go back. And I did go back. Somehow it made me more confident. And I could even tell when I got home, the guys that I was growing up with, it wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't like we were the same. It's like I was a little more mature than they were. You know, it's not to talk about myself, you know, and put myself forward, but that's what being out there did for me that summer. I went back to scout camp for the next 2 or 3 years, and I started going out on my own. I would take a weekend trip, and then a weekend became a week, and then a week became 2 weeks, and 2 weeks became 3 weeks. My first trip, you know, maybe the Catskills, then I went up to the Adirondacks, then I went out to the Rocky Mountains, then next thing I knew, it was the Alps and the Pyrenees. Northern Alaska, Northern Canada, Greenland, Lapland, Northern Norway, Northern Finland, Andes Mountains, down in Patagonia. It's not enough to look at it on TV or, you know, Discovery Channel. I just want to see for myself. I'm just born curious. I have a degree in psychology, so I got interested in ethnography and how people live and what their culture is like. I'll pick a culture, let's say the Inuit culture in northern Alaska, and I'll sit here and I'll study their history, their tradition, their culture, what they eat for breakfast. And then I say, but I gotta go there. And I show up. And people are like, who are you? You know, and they say, where's your party? And I say, no, I'm by myself. You're here by yourself? Well, where'd you come from? From New York City? What are you doing here? So I tell them what I told you. I'm interested in who you are and how you live. And I just thought I'd drop by and find out for myself. I've been all these places, and I hear the same thing. Our culture is dying, and when we die, it's gone. But then you're here. They want to show me some of their skills. I remember they were telling me in Kikitajuak, when a young boy gets to be a teenager, they have him go out and try to kill a seal. So then it was, hi, JR, here's a baseball bat. I'm like, yeah, all right. You know, I've never done it before, you know, so.
Did you do it?
Yeah, I didn't catch anything, you know, but I made some great friends doing it. So it's been, you know, it's been an exciting life. And it's not just to visit people. I've seen bear, snakes, lizards, alligators, sharks, mountain lion, camels, what do you call them?
Rams?
I once had a close encounter with a pack of wolves. This is up in the Yukon. I like to have a mug of hot chocolate after I eat my dinner. Before I do the cognac. Yeah, before I do the cognac. Yeah. And suddenly I look over here and there was a wolf there. I was going, oh, wow. And then I look over there and there was one over there.
Then there was one over here and one over here. I'd never heard them coming. I don't know which way they came from. They just almost like they just appeared. Then the alpha came up and got like right here. It was looking like here. I couldn't look away. The eyes were so hypnotic and so beautiful that I just couldn't look away. It's simple as that. And after a few seconds, the wolf turned around and went and sat down, and the tension was broken. And then they started playing and running around. And so I was trying to feel, for my camera, and I couldn't do it. And I took a quick look around and grabbed it. And when I turned around, they were gone. Just like that. I've been doing this so long and have been in so many situations that I've had the opportunity to be scared a lot of times. I decided to take a trip down to Tasmania. The route through the Southwest Arthur Mountains was considered very difficult, a very, very difficult route. You're supposed to be all that, why don't you go down there and check it out? And this is totally stupid, right? And I should have known better because I wasn't young. I mean, I had been backpacking for decades. Right from day one, I was getting my ass kicked by nature. And then I got lost. I lost the trail. So I started going this way, that way. Where's the trail? I couldn't find it. And so I decided to take my pack off, put it on the ground because it was heavy. I could find this trail much more quickly by doing that. After a while, I found the trail. I went back to pick up the pack, and I couldn't find it. I was starting to shiver, and I had no food, no tent, no clothing, no gear, no nothing. I was watching the sun go down, and I knew that once it got behind the peaks, the temperature was going to drop. And I had plenty of time to think about how it was my last day. I kept saying to myself, when they find your body, everybody's going to say that you were stupid and you shouldn't have been here and you didn't know what you were doing. And that bothered me more than anything else. I didn't want to die, but I was getting colder and colder, and it was getting darker. I had no flashlight, I had nothing. You couldn't make a fire, there was no wood. And it was just at the last moment, by accident, I'm walking this way and I happen to look over and I saw the pack. Lessons that you learn in the wilderness, they're tough lessons, they're tough lessons, but
I'm sure you didn't make that mistake again.
I never made that mistake again. I never, ever made that mistake again. Every trip I ever did, when I come back home, I'm not the same person who left. What you learn most is who you are, how you handle adversity, how you make decisions when nobody else is there. How do you deal with fear? How do you deal with dangerous situations when it's only you? Because when you're by yourself, you can't bullshit yourself. It's just you. It's a matter of, are you going to come home or not? Back in the day, I made a fire every single night. That was what you did. You made a camp, you had your dinner, you made a nice little campfire. And I really liked it, but as time went on, the woods got drier. Things are changing, and they're changing in the wrong way, and they're changing in the wrong way very quickly. I can remember going to Glacier National Park. I remember wandering for days, just looking at glaciers. And then you go back to Glacier now, and most of those glaciers are gone. The ecology is deteriorating. The natural habitat that we've had all these centuries is no longer there. We need to do something really quickly in order to slow this trend down and ideally to stop it and reverse it.
because left the way it is now, we're going to lose everything we have. Most people, when you talk to them the first trip, and they usually say something like, I never knew it was this beautiful. I never knew it was like this. And I've seen so many people just standing there and looking around like they can't believe it. I've looked around myself doing the same thing. I've actually hugged a tree, although I don't think I've ever told anybody that. Mother Nature does not discriminate. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're black or white or rich or poor or conservative or progressive. It doesn't care who you are or what you believe. Mother Nature is for everybody, and Mother Nature treats everybody the same. One of the best things that ever happened to me in all my backpacking happened in Gates of the Arctic National Park. And that was the day I climbed a mountain that had never been climbed before, and I was able to name it after my brother. So if you happen to be in that neighborhood, climb that mountain and send me a note saying that you've been to the top of Lloyd Mountain. That would be great. I look back at my own life when I was young. I went out into the outdoors and I got the confidence I needed to come back home and realize my dream. I would like other kids to have that same experience. I wish they knew how much it would change them. That's what I wish they knew.
To walk its length. His words, spoken on a sunny day in 1963, gave me the courage to step into the unknown, the resilience to persist when the path was unclear, and the belief that an inner compass can guide the way forward. My trail has led me across continents rather than courtrooms, but the lesson I learned from Dr. King remains the same, that courage, resilience, and moral clarity are universal tools for building a more just and humane world. Thank you very much.
That was fabulous. Thank you. Have another short round of applause. I'd like to open it up to a short Q&A. Would anyone like to ask some questions?
How did you finance all these trips?
The question is, how did I finance all my trips? The answer is I have a job. I never had a grant. I never applied for any money. Every single trip that I ever took came from me. I tell people that I'm just a curious guy with a valid credit card. So look, fortunately, because I have my own business, I had the flexibility where I could take off for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. I had a kid brother who was mentioned in the video here, and I actually brought him into the business and taught him the business so that I wouldn't have to be there doing it. Because as everybody knows, a kid brother's job is to make his older brother happy. Now, we don't know this, right? So yeah, I paid for it on my own. Yes, sir.
I don't think I've ever been with somebody in the presence of somebody who was also in the presence of Dr. King. And I'm wondering if you had 60 seconds with him, how, what would you comment, question, what would you say?
I never spoke to Dr. King directly.
If he had 60 seconds with Dr. King, what would he say or ask?
I ask if I can have like 2 minutes. To be honest, his message was so clear to me, and so impactful that if I did have 60 seconds, I'd probably be so like starstruck, I wouldn't even know what to say. But fortunately for me, he didn't have to say anything. I got it. I understood. He kept saying, "I have a dream. I had a dream. I have a dream," and I was like, "I have a dream too." And if he can make his dream come true, maybe a kid like me from the projects in New York, maybe I can make my dream come true. And now here I am in Wellesley, after years of trekking in wilderness areas around the world. And so, I'm glad I got on that Greyhound bus that morning and went down there because it really changed me, really did. Yes, sir. There's a...
Thanks so much. It's great to hear from you and hear your adventures. I was very fortunate when I graduated high school. I got a scholarship to the Outward Bound program in Colorado, which really changed my life and opened up, as you said, to the experience of the nature and the wilderness around us. My question to you is, what is the most effective way that you have thought of having that happen for more of the young people, and particularly young people who, like yourself, grew up under circumstances where they might not have, where that might not have been an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It might not be an easy way to find.
So what happened, a couple of years ago, 2024, 2023, I had the opportunity, because I'm in the Explorers Club, to take a group of 10 young people. Well, of course, everybody's young to me, no matter what their age, but from disadvantaged neighborhoods. There were 5 from New York and 5 from different countries in Africa, 18 to 25 years old. Most of them had never been away from home. They never had a passport. They'd never been overseas or anything like that. And so the 10 of us met in Nairobi, and the idea was I was going to take them on a 10-day trek across the Masai Mara. They had never been in a tent. They had never carried a pack. They were like, what is going on? And to your point, I also had with me 2 Outward Bound leaders. And they were taking these kids through all these exercises and challenges to build their confidence, to bond with the other kids, because nobody knew anybody at the beginning. They were totally petrified. And especially when I said, I'm taking your cell phones until we finish. No, don't do that. No. Oh my God. So it started out, kind of rough. And when they were told, why don't you do this and why don't you try that, they were like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so we kept saying, listen, don't say you can't. At least try it. At least try it. And next thing you know, they'll say, okay, I'll try it. And the next thing you know, some of the other kids would say, come on, man, you can do it, you can do it. And they started to encourage each other. By the time those 10 days were up, these kids were totally different. And I know that they were going to go back to their neighborhood and tell all their friends, what the experience was like. When we first left home from JFK Airport, all of the kids were there and their families were there, their mothers and fathers and everybody, and all the parents and family members were coming up and they say, JR, you better take care of my kid. He's never been away from home, take care of my kid. Now, when we came back, like 2 weeks later, because after we finished the 10 days in the Masai Mara, then I took them to Tanzania, and we all climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And these kids, they just ran up, it was like nothing, And then when we got back home, the next day, the same parents called me up and they say, what did you do to my kid? This is great. I got a couple of other kids. Would you take them next year? So, yeah, I can, it means a lot to me to be able to give a kid a chance, to be able to give them an opportunity to see what they can do, to build their confidence, and to really share it with other people. And, ideally, believe that they can do more than they ever thought they can do. And that's really what I'm about.
I didn't really want to come this morning, but I found you so inspiring. I'm so glad to be here. So one of the things I heard you say, you talked about endurance, patience, steady courage, attention, resolve, and restraint. And these are words that I really resonate with, but I feel under the current situation we live in our country, I'm feeling a lot of voices saying, now isn't the time for those things, that it's the time for something stronger. And I wonder if you had a take on that.
I really don't like to get too much into politics. I'm just a solo hiker out there, but we all know what time it is. These are tough times, and there are things that need to be done. And from my perspective, my point of view, it's about the next generation. It's about young people coming up and maybe feeling insecure, maybe feeling disenfranchised, and maybe just being in a situation where they never had any confidence, where they didn't have anybody to tell them, you can do this, like I had my parents. And so I try to keep it simple. I try, if I can influence a young person to want to be better and to believe they can be better, then that's really all I need. That it? All right. Oh, got another.
Hello.
Hello.
I really appreciate this opportunity. So my question is more around culture, right? Because what you do and what you did is not typical of the African American culture, right? And so it's one thing to be accepted as an explorer, and the explorer world is another thing to then have to go back to your culture that really doesn't understand it and explain like your why. And so when you're doing something different and you are going against the grain of what we normally do, where'd the courage come from? And like as you went back into the community, feeling like you have to explain your work to people who might not get it, like this isn't something that we normally do. We don't normally explore in that way.
Well, you're right. People say you're an explorer. What's up with that? But there again, I try to keep it simple. Every place that I've ever traveled, every group of indigenous people I ever met, whether they were Inuit from Alaska, Lapland reindeer herders, Inca descendants in the Andes Mountains, Aborigines in the Australian outback. Every group I ever visited treated me well, especially when they found out why I was there, that I already knew about their culture, that I was willing to spend my own money to come there, that I didn't represent a university or an organization or a museum, just a curious guy wanting to learn whatever they had to learn, and to see how much they appreciated that somebody would do it. And then to come back home and then go to a school and say to a kid, hey, listen, you know, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, I'm nobody. I just grew up in the projects like you. You know, so there's no secret formula. You just have to, nobody's going to give it to you. You're going to have to work for it. I tell it like it is. And again, ideally, they get the message. I mean, they get the message. You know, and the teachers tell me all the time, they say, you know, JR, we talk to these kids every day. We tell them exactly what you're saying, but until they see somebody that's actually done it, until they've seen somebody that's actually been out there and come back and actually do it, that's when they begin to believe it. So, you know, I believe that for me, just to kind of show up in a school or someplace where there are young people and to encourage them to live the kind of life they want to live. I tell them, you don't have to be an explorer. Have your own dream, whatever that dream is, but go for it. And don't let anybody tell you you cannot do it. And that's my story.
This is a sort of a vague question, but I'd love to hear you reflect a little bit about fear. Your own fear, seeing other people overcome fear. I feel like
Oh, sorry, I'm asking about fear and how you thought about fear, overcame it, how you see other people. I do think kids and their parents in particular, there's so much an elevated level of fear out there. How have you seen people kind of overcome that?
Yeah, when you mentioned fear, I started smiling because I consider myself an expert at fear. Because I've been scared so many times that if there was a PhD in fear, I'd be Dr. Scared. And actually, I have a lecture on fear that I give. And I talk about what fear is, different kinds of fear, how you deal with fear, what you learn from fear. Fear is, you know, it's a great teacher, fear. You know, and what I've learned basically is you should never be afraid to be afraid. Because if you're afraid to be afraid, you'll never do anything. You'll never go anywhere. You'll never experience anything. What you need to do is try to gain the confidence that if you get scared, you can deal with it. And, you know, the other thing is that when you've been scared a lot, the good news is that the next time you won't be as scared anymore. But I don't recommend going out and trying to be scared. If it happens, it happens. But fear has played a big part of my life, mostly because my trips are solo. And when something happened, you know, it's great being alone if you like being alone. It's great being alone until the moment that something happens. And then the first thing you say is, why am I here by myself? There's nobody else around here. And you get scared, you know, but I think that I'm smarter now because I've had to deal with fear. And that I have a perspective about life that I wouldn't have gained had I not been in fearful situations. Now, it wouldn't bother me if I was never scared again. Don't think I like it, you know, but there's something to learn from it.
So thank you so much for this talk. It's been really great and enlightening. I also think it's interesting about exploration. I think exploration is all around us. We can explore, we don't have to get on a plane, we can explore outside wherever we are. But in your talk, you talked about Dr. King's idea of moral clarity. And I just wondered if you could just give us your take on that in light of, I mean, fear is a big thing, but what about moral clarity in the context of your journey?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear what your question is.
It was just in your talk, you talked about Dr. King's idea of moral clarity.
Yeah.
And so I just was curious to get your take on that in light of all the experiences you've had.
Your moral clarity, I'm not really sure you can teach it. I think you can be influenced by somebody who has it, but I'm not really sure if a person, especially a younger person, has that insight. Now, I could be wrong. That's a very good question. I've never actually thought of it that way. But moral clarity, I believe, is part of the deal. It's part of what you need to acquire, what you need to gain. And, if you're fortunate enough to have parents who instill that in you, or any other person of influence that can put you on that right path to moral clarity, then that's great. Because without it, you're only a shell. No matter how well you think you're doing, and no matter how much you think of yourself, if you're not a person with moral clarity, then that's a big dimension that's missing from who you are. And even as a 19-year-old kid down in Washington when Dr. King gave his speech, that was, for me, something that I could see, really, it was more than just words. It was more than just what he did. It was the kind of person that he was. And, if there's a book about how to do it, I'll go and read it. But it's something that's very important. Thanks for that question. And thanks for everybody. This is really great.